Hey everyone. The biggest farms in Asia may be scam farms. You're watching Techstrong Gang. Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel. I am not in studio today because, of course, I'm getting ready to get out to San Francisco for the RSA conference. So I'm coming at you from a place called Highland Beach, Florida. Not many people know it. It's a sleepy little 3-mile stretch of A1A. But we've got a great show for you this fine Monday. A lot of going on, pre-RSA stuff. It's our last pre-RSA gang. Let me introduce you to our gang members for today. I want to start off with someone making her first appearance here on the gang with us. We're really excited to have her, though. If you follow the cybersecurity beat, you've probably read some of the things she's written over the years. Teri Robinson. Teri, welcome, and thanks for being here.
Thank you. I am so pleased to be here. I can't wait to get started.
I think it's going to be fun. Looking forward to it. Joining Teri today, also from a cybersecurity bend, our resident Canadian, or is that an oxymoron, a resident Canadian? But he's up in Canada anyways, our cyber expert, Chris Blask. Hey, Chris, how are you doing?
I'm good. Good to be here. Glad to be here. Yeah, I'm an American in Canada, so I have a Canadian family, and everyone gets that confused, and so do I. So I plan on adding to that more today. So
very cool. Also joining us today from New Mexico, looking great in that 4K. He's the CEO of Deploy Hub, open source advocate extraordinaire, our own Tracy Ragan. Hey, Tracy, how you doing?
I'm doing great, and I'm really excited to have Teri on, another cyber expert. This is going to be a great conversation.
Absolutely. And then rounding out the cast, it's the dean of our panel. He's Chief Content Officer from Harrison, New York. That's lefty, throws righty, Mike Vizard. Hey, Mike, how are you?
And I, too, am excited to see Teri on the show because we have another delegate from the great state of New York. So finally.
Right here in Harlem.
The great state of New York.
Yeah.
Really, very cool. Mm-hmm. All right, so let's kick it off, Mike. I said a little something on the opening. It seems Asia has started a new kind of scam farm.
I think this has, been something of a dirty little secret, but most of these scams online are actually being perpetrated by folks that have been roped into these, I guess, scam rings is the only way to call it, or run by these syndicates. Then they're all operating out of countries in Africa and other places like Asia, where they're basically turned into slaves that are driving these scams and sending people email and creating all kinds of false, now deep fakes and all kinds of stuff. And Chris, I know you've been following this for a while, and it seems to have become overwhelming, but is there anything to be done about any of this stuff? I mean, the UN kind of shined the spotlight on it, but it seems like to me that this is, not just criminally wrong, but just gotten to a level of moral turpitude.
Right. I'm trying to think of something here. Let's take a direction on this, right? So one is criminals do criminal things, right? Organized crime does, oddly enough, organized crime. And this, in the digital age has transitioned to the point where it makes economic logical sense for criminal organizations to do these things. And the other half of it, again, is how old this is, right? I happen to, I don't think maybe it was 10 years ago or so, witness perhaps the last of the actual postal versions of this. Some good old boyfriend of mine here in Canada contacted me and said, hey, I won the Irish lottery, right? And I had to drive over to his house, look at this thing, get him to, change his banking information that he'd already shared. So, this is it. In this particular case, and this, the story we're talking about here, this is one of these global existential criminal situations. We're talking actual human slavery and exploitation. So we can take it from any angle we like. As a security person, I would like to, beat this horse again, that this is an example of how many fundamentals we're missing, right? You have no idea. There's no way we can tell, an elderly, non-technically savvy, family member, how they can distinguish something like this that is a scam from something that isn't a scam. So there's problems up and down the stack with this one.
Yeah. I mean, to me, there's two main issues here. One is the scams that these people perpetrate. As you said, Chris, they prey on the weak. They prey on the elderly. They prey on the non-sophisticated or unsophisticated when it comes to this kind of stuff. And that's bad. And guys, it's not just emails anymore. It's smishing, right? SMS messaging. It's phone calls, right? We've all gotten those phone calls where, someone gets on the phone and says hello, and you hear like the whole call center going on in the background, and you can imagine somewhere in Bangladesh or Sri Lanka or somewhere is this huge boiler room operation, right? With hundreds or dozens at the very least of these people just smiling and dialing, trying to talk you out of your money. But what makes it really insidious is that the people who are doing the work here, sending the emails, making the calls, sending the text messages, are not the heads of the criminal operations themselves, but this is akin to sex trafficking. It's akin to child trafficking. They get these people in these places, and you're right, Mike. It's not just Asia. This happens in Africa, right? It probably happens in the U.S. with illegal immigrants who get taken advantage of and stuff. But they get these people in with the promise of, hey, you're going to get a job and you can make hundreds and thousands of dollars a week. And then once they get them in there, there's no getting out. You're sucked into this life, and so it's a form of slavery. It's abuse. So it's doubly bad. And it's high time, these countries where this is taking place have a responsibility to crack down on it.
Which is in the US, by the way. The US.
No, it's in the US. I don't doubt it.
And I want to point something out that, when I had I have a cousin, she called me one day and she was in an absolute panic. She had lost $40,000 in one of these scams. She did not want to tell anybody. She reached out to me because she felt like she could talk to me and I could tell her what to do to protect herself in the future, which is part of the problem. The shame that goes along with these scams is part of the way that they work. Because if I kept encouraging her to go to the police, they don't know what to do. Call your local representative. They didn't know what to do for her. So I finally said, go call a newspaper. So she finally got brave enough to tell her story to a newspaper, even though she was full of shame and did not want to do it. They put a note in the local newspaper where she was, and they got hundreds of people calling and saying they had also been scammed. So there is a part of this, the success of these organizations, it is created by us being quiet about it and not really understanding the breadth of the problem. So I feel like, I'm the person who always talks about fixing problems, vulnerabilities when they get to production. Well, these vulnerabilities are in production. How do we hear about them? How do we let the communities that are being hit know that this is happening? And how do we track this kind of illegal activity? Because in her journey, there was nobody to talk to, no one, and that's a problem in
I
itself.
was going to say I have a similar thing with a family member, and the shame factor is huge. Didn't want to talk about it. Didn't want to, sort of spread the word. Told me because she knew the kind of work that I did, and that was it. And we sort of locally spread the word to people quietly in her community. On the other hand, my mother, who passed away at 100, was adamant about not falling for a scam. she would call somebody out if she got a phone call, an email, a text, or whatever. She was on the other side. But yeah, and so I actually had this discussion when I was closing out my mom's estate. I was in her bank, and they had signs up all over in customer service, particularly aimed at elderly people, talking about the kinds of scams that they could face, and what to do and the steps that they should take. I should have probably screenshotted or taken a snap of what their advice was, but I did talk to the banker there, and they said, yes, we have people coming in all the time, and sometimes they sort of sheepishly, confess that something has happened. It's also, when it comes to like pulling money out of accounts, perhaps the financial institutions can be a little more aggressive. I mean, if you see an 80-year-old person coming in and wanting to pull out, I don't know, $40,000 or $50,000 out of an account, because they're going to then go to a kiosk at Circle K or something like that and convert it to Bitcoin or whatnot and send it, then is that, something that maybe they should ask a couple of questions? You can't invade somebody's privacy, but can you say, is everything okay? Are you sure you want to do this? I don't know what the answer is there, but
Yeah, and in my cousin's case, Terry, she actually went to the bank and pulled the money out and did the transfer, and they begged her not to do it, and she was convinced that she owed
well,
this money
and
to
I'm
them.
gonna say, what the scammer that got my friend actually told her that people at the bank were in on it. So she needed to, you know, to be quiet, to kind of
Mhm.
Can I make a suggestion here? I would suggest the following. We know that these operations are being hosted in certain countries. We also know that there's a high probability that money is being slid out the back door from these operations to the people who run those countries. We are currently discussing the use of tariffs to be applied to countries that are shipping fentanyl around the world. Ipso facto, this crime is probably just up there with the same level of harm. We just don't quantify it as much. But since we all know at least 3 people who have probably been scammed, maybe it's time to get a little more aggressive with the countries that are hosting these operations.
Again, yeah, I'll just echo what's been said. I don't think necessarily even Canada, it might be entirely clean, and I have my thoughts about the US on this. But, let me suggest something else. And this is going to sound as cliche and as trendy as it sounds in my head, but I think it's true. Chat GPT, right? I think even on the recent episodes of this, I might have mentioned this. I've had some homeless friends, some people in really dire straits, and found myself saying, honestly, install ChatGPT. Because sometimes when you're all alone, just asking a question of anybody, like you say, Tracy, people I've been contacted similarly by friends and family. It's like, because it's embarrassing. And with all the flaws and all the downsides of what we call AI these days, that might be the recommendation. That might be the sign in the bank. We say to our friends, family, critically, the older ones are less technically sophisticated. If this looks weird, you don't want to talk to anybody else, there's this little app. And it doesn't have to be literally ChatGPT, but one of these AI apps, just say, does this sound right? Because even if the answers, as you find when you use these tools, even if the answers aren't totally correct, it's a good place to start. And if you take this, and go to Google and put in 3 words, Irish lottery, you're not going to get a lot of help. So maybe this is one of these cases we can point at that this new trendy class of tools has a real benefit. So I can't think of anything else that's going to help.
Couple of things here. First of all, Chris, I appreciate that sweet little old lady voice you used there. To ask ChatGPT if this is right. I should save that. But Mike Vizard, are you sitting here telling me that tariffs are the answer to cure this?
I'm saying it's one tool in the kit, but we got to get aggressive with these places that are hosting these.
I don't know if tariffs, there's too much
Yeah,
abuse.
and I'm not convinced that it's not, they're not nation states. These are criminals. These are mobs. These are criminals that are doing it. And if they're in some small country in Africa, who cares about a tariff?
Right.
And they're in Alabama and, Illinois too.
Yeah, I don't think it happens in places. It does. that you would be
Well, and
surprised.
the other aspect of that is we're already using tariffs pretty aggressively. I'm not sure how much more we can go without damage to us.
No, yeah, you know, and then it
But I think
becomes a
it's I
political
think
tool.
it's an interesting concept.
But it's never discussed. It's never discussed, and this problem destroys as many lives as fentanyl
Indeed.
does.
Mhm.
And it's not
Very-
discussed, and the people who are targeted are shamed. They don't want to talk about it. It's hidden, and we do not have a national discourse around this particular problem. And I'm glad, Terry, that your bank has notices up for
Yeah.
people to
I just think,
understand it.
people understand the downside of fentanyl, right? I mean, and they'll pontificate on it. I mean, just your average person on the street. I don't think they understand these kinds of threats. And also, I think there's maybe some more judgment there with people. Oh, you were just dumb. You were stupid. You got scammed, which doesn't help the situation.
I mean, I will tell you, I bank with Chase. And anytime I go to Zelle or wire money, I get so many pop-ups and they want you to affirmatively click, right? That you've read this stuff about, once it's gone, it's gone. Make sure this is real. Make sure this isn't a scam. Here's some resources to check and blah, blah, blah. Now, I don't know how many people actually just click the button and move on and how many actually read or follow through. But, and again, depending on your view of government, what the role of government and stuff is this an individual responsibility thing, even though they are preying on the weak and the lonely and the elderly? But is it an individual responsibility thing, or do we have a collective responsibility, both from the corporate financial institution level as well as the government level, to protect people from this?
Yeah. I think
Empirically, we do. You look at our history, right? This is the ancient scam, right? This, at the root of this is nothing new. This is the shiny, glass ring that looks like a diamond that some desperate stranger is trying to convince you, that you're going to get a good deal out of. This is the desire, as Moist von Lipwig, and would say in all the Discworld books, right? This is that hope we all have. So, Alan, yeah, I mean, we have been instituting laws and protections and mechanisms against this forever. So it's part of, yes, individual responsibility at the end of the day, but also laws and mechanisms.
I have another thing I'd like to see because, I'm clearly the radical in this conversation, but I would like to see Amazon and eBay and all these people who make a living off of transactions online to contribute to some sort of fund to combat this stuff. And that we set up, because ultimately we need to protect.
Could we just start with them paying taxes on the income they make?
No, I'm thinking that they have a specific interest in this particular issue because it destroys the faith anybody has in online transactions in the first
Right,
place.
but this isn't just e-commerce, right? A lot of this is romance stuff, right? They preying on a lonely man or woman. Oh, I'd like to get to know you. As I've gotten older, I get a lot of these notes online. Oh, I'd like to, so it's all part of that. But anyway, I think we've talked this one out. Let's take a break here on Techstrong Gang, and let's come back and talk about AI app security agents. I'm sure this is going to be one of 50 that I hear in the next week at RSA. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
Hey folks, we're back, and as Alan alluded, there are all these new AI agents that are promising to review your code, make some suggestions about how to fix something if there's a security issue, and even look at the architecture itself to see if it's weak in the first place. To Alan's point, there'll probably be tons of these tools coming along. The first two that at least we're aware of is Ender Labs and Cycode, but I can't imagine anybody who's in the DevSecOps space not having some sort of similar capability. But Tracy, A, is this going to work? And B, is it going to make a difference?
Well, I think one of the important pieces of information that comes from this indoor labs in particular is the acknowledgement that the code that we're generating through AI is not necessarily safe. And we've had this discussion in the past about the fact that when you start generating this many lines of code, you have more opportunities to have vulnerabilities in them, and it's harder to keep up with it. So, they're doing something pretty unique, and I'm happy to see that we're moving beyond just code scanning for known vulnerabilities. And in this case, they were literally mapping risk factors to coding. It looks like they've taken some time. It says the Indoor in particular has looked at 4.5 million open source projects. And yes, there's that many out there, and there's more than that. To understand what the structure of code looks like, where those and how they map to those risk factors. So I think we're getting to a level of maturity that will actually make a difference in application security. That being said, there's always, it's great to have a good goalie. It's great to have somebody standing in front of your house making sure the bad guys don't get in. But when they do get in, we need a better way of responding. And it looks like we're starting to think about responding. And, Cycode is talking about using AI to fix things faster, understand how to fix things. If you've ever gone through the process of trying to fix a vulnerability and you walk through the journey of that, sometimes it looks like you should have a PhD. It's not easy. It doesn't just say, here's a Git repo that has a fix in it, go pull this in. You have a lot of work to do to remediate some of this code. So AI is this is where we need to apply AI in the app security problem. So yes, I believe this will make a big difference, but code, it will never be perfect. And there will always be vulnerabilities that make it to production. We're not going to be able to stop chaos any more than we can stop people from making bad decisions and who they talk to and give their money to. It's just one of those problems.
And there will always be new vulnerabilities discovered after we deploy code. So we're always going to have some sort of issue. But
at least in this case, what they're saying is we're going to go look at the structure of the code. We're going to go look at the architecture of the code. And we're going to do more than just find a known vulnerability and say, don't put that in there. It is helping us it's helping us see the problem in a way that not every single programmer can see it, or not every AI agent who's generating code might understand. It's a broader picture.
Teri, when I look at this, and you've been at this for a long time as well as I have, but you forget. But the amount of technical debt we have on security and vulnerabilities in existing applications is massive. And so we might be at fixing all that legacy code for another decade, or do you think we'll just ignore that and kind of try to be better from
maybe
here?
a combination, because I think a lot of that legacy code does still need to be fixed, right? And all those dependencies, that's the issue too, right? You have one thing that you might look up at that it affects something else, and I think that you're going to have to deal with the legacy, but I also think you have to have this path for moving forward. I was really excited about sort of this report and the opportunities there, because I think it could, mean some great things for advancing security.
I've often wondered, and maybe Alan has an opinion on this, but at what point do I really just spend time fixing a legacy app, or should I just go shoot the thing and replace it with something more modern altogether that runs more securely?
That sounds very logical, but that doesn't happen in the real world. And especially because it's just a security issue. That's certainly not enough for me to throw it out and start over. The world is full of brown, dirty, messy fields, not green fields. And if our answer was always, out with the old, in with the new, what a wonderful world it would be. But that's not the world we live in.
Come on, AI agents are going to make it easy to build new software.
No,
around it.
We've used tools forever that does exactly that. You pass it a repo and it'll take it from one language to the next and modernize it for you, and then you get to clean it up and push it back out. But it doesn't necessarily fix your vulnerabilities or the architecture around that might encourage vulnerabilities. Let's put it
Yeah,
that way.
I'm kind of like Alan, like
Not happening.
So
sort of, creating a whole new thing. I don't know that that's practical or reasonable or what anybody's going to do. It reminds me, I was in Singapore a year and a half ago, and was looking out from this tower, and a business guy that I was having dinner with said, you have to, look past there at the reclaimed lands, right? Because they took land from the sea or whatever. But he was talking to me about how in Singapore with their buildings, you see all these new buildings, right? There are very few old, whatever. He said, oh yeah, every however many years we tear them down and rebuild them. And I was just, startled by that, but it seems to me that that's quite the investment, and not so practical everywhere else in the world. And I think maybe the same thing. You have to fix the legacy. So, as much as you'd like to have shiny new stuff.
I also feel like, and maybe this is just me, but so much of our focus these days is still on the source code. Like, we're going to fix the problem at the root, and that's noble. But Alan, as you well know, most of what's running out there in the legacy environment is a bunch of binaries that, I don't really see as many tools out there to go fix the binaries and the things that are actually running.
This is the dirty little secret, right? We saw it during COVID with the unemployment checks that are on the COBOL system, and we don't have COBOL engineers. But, app modernization proceeds at its own pace. And I'm of the opinion that there's not much any of us can do, because when will an app get modernized? When it pays to get modernized, right? When there is a bottom line benefit to doing that modernization that outweighs the Band-Aid approach to what most of us do, then it gets modernized and you move from the binary to something modern or microservice architectures and all this. But until there's a profit motive there, it don't happen. That's, it's the market work, and it's not a bad thing, maybe.
I can see a model though where that dynamic is gonna, if not change, get accelerated, right? Because the bad guys also have access to the tools that let them scan your code and then identify weaknesses and discover vulnerabilities, and they'll be doing that a whole lot faster, and then they'll be creating the exploit a whole lot faster. So the amount of attacks against software could exponentially increase in the months ahead, to the point where more businesses are going to conclude that running a lot of legacy software is just too risky.
And this is why we get back to the point that we need to understand the things that we're not doing. And I think the things that AI could be doing better is that we don't really understand our risk when we see a vulnerability. So let's say there's some vulnerabilities in some legacy software. Does that ever execute? Does that instruction ever get hit in the binary? Does it actually ever do anything? It could just be a package that was consumed and is sitting there. So we have focused so much on shifting left that we have forgot about shifting right. And what do we need to do to protect the runtime environments, the endpoints, and how do we get fixes to them as soon as possible? The government right now, I think it's the Navy, is looking at trying to come up with a way to fix a vulnerability without source code, right? Do some kind of a binary extraction and fix something and push it back in without the source code. I don't think it's possible. And even if it is possible, the first time you re-release the code back into the production environment, you just erased what you did. So we have a lot of work to do on how to fix fast, how to make sure we can remediate within, in minutes, not the months that it's taking today.
So mitigating and remediating vulnerabilities you can do without necessarily changing code. You can shut off certain port accesses, or use some sort of firewalls, or picket fence kind of stuff. Um, and those might be band-aids until you can get to the source code. But, will AI, let's get back to the topic at hand. Will AI security apps, security agents help us? Chris, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I think this is a good, good example of definitions and terminology, because what everybody's saying is true, and we're talking about this as artificial intelligence. And to be clear, what we call artificial intelligence today is neither artificial nor intelligence. It is pattern matching at scale. That's why these large language models work. We can get into the human language level of pattern matching, and this is what we're talking about, for security and code. And it's a wonderful tool, like all the other applications for, again, what we are currently calling artificial intelligence. But it has limitations. So you want to apply this pattern matching at scale to, the kind of trivial chat GPT, human language matching, pattern matching, search the internet kind of thing. Recognize that it's going to be wrong a fair bit of the time, but it saves a lot of time. You want to use it in this case, for your massive, all the things everybody's talking about here. Great. It probably saves you a lot of time, but it's not going to be right all the time. And if you don't know that, then you just picked up a hammer and you think it's an axe. It's not going to work out well. These are tools that have a certain function, a certain definition, and literally the term we keep using to refer to them is misleading, and it sets the wrong expectations. It's not artificial and it's not intelligent.
That sounds like the opening for another artificial intelligent. No, artificial or intelligent. Speak among yourselves.
I'm not sure people care how it's done, as long as it gets done and it's automatic, right?
Yep.
All right. Automation right now for DevOps pipeline is critical. We've got to figure out a way to get the fix back through as fast as we can.
Agreed. All right, we got to take a break on this one. Let's come back, and we've got a new royal edict coming down from Washington. You're watching Techstrong, gang.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
Hey folks, we're back, and there's yet another executive order being kicked around in Washington. This one kind of talks about directing the Department of Labor and the Department of Education to inject more training and education for AI into the curriculums of K through 12 schools. There's a little irony in the fact that the president is ordering anything about the Department of Education these days, since this is the department he's trying to eliminate. But Alan, in theory, is this an order you can get behind?
Well, look, any order that comes from up high, from His Highness, right, is something we should put behind us. But that being said, the lunacy and hypocrisy of this whole thing. Yes, Mike, you pointed out the obvious. He's directing the Department of Education that he's closing down to go do something about education. But wait, there's more. This is the same man who says we should let the states and the local school boards and the parents decide what curriculum it is and what books they could read or not read and what we should burn and what names we can call our kids and everything else. But now he's setting edicts from up high for us to go do this. This is the reality of the lunacy that we live in. Now, is there anything wrong with saying, hey, we should make AI part of their K-12 curriculum? Absolutely not. I think we absolutely should do that. And it would be good if we had a functioning democracy and government where you had a federal Department of Education who can make those things happen. But you can't talk out of one side of your mouth and say that and then do the kinds of things out of the other side of the mouth that this government does and expect to have any respect from the world and your constituents. So that's the real problem here, right? Another baby gets thrown out with the bathwater. We should be thinking about this as a country. We should be making sure our kids are AI native.
So the irony of this is, let's assume that this gets, embraced by school districts. They're going to go look at countries that may have already started doing this to build a curriculum, right? Because what are you going to teach somebody in, under third grade? Let's just say that. Well, in Finland, they've started doing this. And you know where they started? Fake news. How do you identify a fake AI post? And there was I think it was CBS Sunday Morning had a piece on this, and I read about it and I was fascinated. And they said that an 8-year-old in Finland can identify a fake news faster than a 30-year-old in the US. So let's hope that we do this, because if they do start an AI program and they start teaching us how to identify what's AI generated, which is a perfect thing to start doing at a first grader, then we're going to have a much more educated public in 10 or 15 years. And maybe we won't find ourselves in the place that we're at, where fake news is driving the discourse of our country. So I'm for it.
Agreed.
I read an interesting article yesterday. Do you know of all of the, baby boomers, Gen X's, yada, yada, of all of the, generational groups in our country, who is most susceptible to fake news and believing,
I would say teens.
Gen Z.
Yeah.
Gen Z, because they get almost entirely all of their news from social media. And they, even though it's almost counterintuitive, because you think of them as digital natives. And so they would have learned by now. But no, they're perfectly content feeding at the trough.
They've not been.
And Finland has recognized this because they've had so much coming from Russia. So they've had to figure out a way to defend their population against this kind of onslaught of
And
bad
they're in agreement
information.
that Russia's bad. At this point, they don't want to be influenced by them. Yeah. We kind of haven't come to that agreement in this country in a while. I was going to say, too, that it is a little surprising, but they do get their information from social media. They also haven't been disciplined, as maybe in my generation, to be discerning about news and news sources and information. I mean, maybe it was a luxury to grow up when there were, and then not that they were perfect, but respected newscasters who, you sort of trusted what you were saying.
There were less news sources, right? You had 3 or 4. If you grew up in New York, we had, would we have 7 news stations, and they all had news. 7 TV stations, they all had news. And then you had your newspapers but today, a Gen Z person can't distinguish between PBS NewsHour and I don't know, name one of the disgraced Fox newscasters who are out doing their own thing now.
There's not currently a secretary of
or Joe Rogan for that matter.
Also, they don't.
Well, they
see
don't,
a
and they don't
difference.
understand what has gone behind or the scenes at a place like, say NPR or the New York Times. Even there's a whole editorial process. There's a whole discipline there, right? For an editorial discussion.
So being able to actually understand how to use a prompt in ChatGPT, Chris's recommendation to older people, if you think you're getting scammed, use ChatGPT. Mm-hmm. It may take some time to train most people to actually do research using ChatGPT. So the more we can teach that, the more we can get more educated people voting. Okay, well, that's all I'm saying.
I mean, let me break my. Let me jump in if you don't mind. I'm going to break my typical optimistic Pollyanna view. Well, I agree with all the points we made. Absolutely not. To be clear, this is not what any of you are talking about. This is a political regime that has appointed the autism czar. We know about this guy, David Geiger, right? Whose father lost his medical license because he, with his son, who's now responsible for the autism task force, injected autistic kids my son's age, when they were kids, and blocked puberty and caused osteoporosis and should be in jail. Right. The African American Museum at Smithsonian, by executive order, is ordered to not talk about race or previous American citizens like slave owners in any bad way. And by the way, race is a biological fact. So no, this is, despite the fact that this makes sense on the surface, this is one of these cases, and my political views are not any secret, but this is standard security. You have to be practical and pragmatic about what's being used in what context. And unless you actually believe all of these things this administration believes, then you cannot be in favor of this because you know what they're going to do with it. This is Elon Musk and a group of these folks putting indoctrination powered by AI in the U.S. Educational system. So no.
Without any regard to how it might be used. But so here's the thing.
Oh, they're regarding that very specific aim.
They know how they want it to be.
Here's the thing to take. Here is the thing to take away from all of this. To Alan's earlier point, education is run by the states. So if you're going to be thinking about where you want your kids trained and how you want your kids trained in the age of AI, you might want to think long and hard about what state you're going to live in, because it's going to be different in all 50 of them. So you might want to think about moving if you're in a state that is either A, not taking it seriously, or B, to Chris's point, is using it to advance an agenda that has something to do with some vendor who's fond of Trump. Think long and hard about where you're going to live in the next decade.
I mean, hypothetically, Mike, that's why someone might move from Florida to New York.
That's shocking, and whose youngest kid is now on the honor roll. Go figure.
Or maybe that's why New Mexico's population has exploded in the last 4 years. It's exploded.
Well, I don't know. I'm still calling it.
I think it's New America now, isn't it?
I still do. No,
I think it was. Anyway, hey, wait, I can see where this is going to descend into the first couple, but we got to pull a plug. We will be back tomorrow from RSA conference. Very excited. No, we're not. This is Monday. No, we're not. We'll be back here again, but I'll be at RSA tomorrow. I won't be on. Mike, you got the ship.
All right. We will be talking about security, surprisingly, though.
Okay. Not for us. Until though, everybody, hey, we've got a great lineup of Techstrong TV following today's Techstrong gang, so stay tuned for that. And until next time, Teri, thanks for joining the gang.
Yeah.
We look forward to having you on often.
Had a great time.
Tracy, as always, it's great to have you.
thank you.
Chris, am I going to see you at RSA? You're sitting this one out.
I am sitting this one out. It's hard to do, but have fun for me.
I'll tell them you said hi. All righty. Bye-bye, everyone. We're out.